Started. Okay, so the final one of our pre-Pesach talks. I called it various things, a room with a view. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you around I thought if we can't, we should all go away for Pesach. So let's go to Yerushalayim. But obviously, we all have different budgets. So I decided to present you with 5 hotels, and you can choose which one you want to stay in. And of course, when I pay for a view, I expect something more interesting than that. We'll come back to that later. But this is the first hotel. This is the dear old Dan Pearl, which was opened in, for those of you that don't know it, it's the building standing somewhat decrepitly and sadly, almost opposite. It's between Kikar, Safra and the Jaffa Gate. It was opened in 1996 and it actually closed down in 2003. So it was actually only open for 7 years. And I stayed there. It was actually okay. I think I stayed there for Sukkot. Of course, the owners claimed that the main reason that they needed to close it down was because it was pretty small. It's only got about 140 floors. And they have no way of actually building on the top of it because they're limited in height opposite the Jaffa Gate. I read an article actually a couple of years ago that they actually approved a plan to redevelop it. If you want to stay there now, by the way, you're going to actually have to squat because it's closed and there's holes. The windows are boarded up and it really looks terrible. But anyway, there were plans to redevelop it and allow them to dig down on the other side, not on the side that's opposite the walls of the old city, and that way allow them to extend the hotel. But when it started, actually on that site, not when the Dan Pearl started, in 1891, there was another hotel there, which you see on the left. No, that's not some speakeasy in the Wild West, although it very much looks like it. And that was the Hotel Howard. By the turn of the century, by 1900, it had become the Hotel du Parc, and I've no idea really what that looked like. I haven't got a picture of that, but underneath on the bottom left, you have the very, very famous Hotel Fust. And the story behind that's a picture from 1931. You see the hotel in Yerushalayim with the Nazi flag hanging from it. And of course, the hotel was owned by the Fast family, who were German Templars. And okay, they either sympathized with the Nazi government. In truth, they had no option anyway, since they had no option but to fly the Nazi flag from the building. And the building actually housed the German consulate for a number of years. Now, during the war, the Templars all got interned, or some of them got repatriated to Germany or to Australia. It's another story, a very good story, that one. Maybe we'll do that as well sometime. But you can see on the top right-hand side, the hotel was used as a hostel for Australian soldiers during the war. And underneath, you see the Dan Pearl. I think it actually looks worse than that now. So anyone that wants to stay there, you're welcome. Just to offer you something a little bit different and hopefully slightly better, this is the Imperial Hotel. Now, those of you that, you probably ignored this, but if you go into Jaffa Gate, you have 2 ways of getting down. If you're going to go to the Kotel, 2 ways. You either go straight down the Arab Market, or you turn right, you go through the Armenian Quarter. But on the left-hand side, before you go down to the Arab Market, there's a hotel on the left-hand side called the Imperial Hotel, which is owned now by the church. And actually, it's not owned now by the church. I'll come to that in a second. It was built in 1884, and it was built as a hotel called the Grand Hotel. But in 1898, something very important happened. And have a look on the bottom left. You can see this is Kaiser Wilhelm II, the Kaiser of Germany, who was also Kaiser during the First World War. And he came and visited Jerusalem. Famously, he insisted on coming into the old city on his carriage. We mentioned that when we talked about Allenby. And he stayed at the Grand Hotel, which in his honor was renamed the Imperial Hotel. As I mentioned, it was owned by the church. In 1948 and 1967, The church was damaged in the fighting that went on between the Arabs and the Israelis. But straight after the 1967 war, we didn't destroy it. We returned it to the Djani family, which is an Arab family, which ran the hotel. In the 50s and 60s, it housed a very nice cinema, and it also was a favorite for Palestinian weddings. There was a nice banqueting hall there, and weddings were held there. The building is actually quite nice. There are a lot of architectural features which are interesting. There's some Roman columns there. It's quite nice actually to go inside and have a look at it. But in 2005, shock horror, something very nasty happened, and that is that the Greek Orthodox Church, as they've done in many places in Jerusalem, decided to sell the hotel to a shell company. Simon can probably knows the shell company, but the shell company was a front for the Ateret Kohanim group, which is a right-wing group, which is has been busy buying up properties in the Muslim and the Christian quarter. And the Arab reaction was pretty furious to this. In fact, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch, who you see at the bottom, this is the most senior figure in the church in Jerusalem. His name is Irenaeus. He was not only removed as Patriarch, he was actually defrocked, removed to the level of a simple monk, and incarcerated in the Greek Patriot building, where he remained for 13 years, never able to go out. In fact, an Arab family would winch him. He was on one of the upper floors, and they would winch food through his bedroom window to keep him fed and watered during that time. He became sick, and a year ago, he was allowed by the Greek Orthodox Church, by the church authorities. Here you see him at Ben Gurion Airport in a wheelchair. He was allowed to return to Greece. I'm not sure whether he's still alive. The status of the hotel now, it was taken to court by the church, who stated there's something in law which if you sell, there's buyer can be sorry afterwards. It was taken to court and they lost. The status of the building was upheld, but last year, again, it was taken to the High Court, and the lawyers acting for Ateret Kohanim, or for the front company, never actually turned up to court, and they were fined 50,000 shekel, or dollars, 50,000 shekel, I think, and the case rumbles on. So at the moment, it's still owned by Ateret Kohanim. It's still run as a hotel by that Arab family. Remains to be seen what will happen. But if you don't want to stay there, YMCA. Okay, the YMCA was, we know where that is. That's on the same street as the King David. It was opened in 1933. Again, land that was purchased from the church. And it was opened in 1933 by Field Marshal Lord Allenby, who we met in one of the previous talks. And this is what he said. He said, "Here is a place whose atmosphere is peace, where political and religious jealousies can be forgotten and international unity fostered and developed." And that was it was designed for. It was designed to for harmony between Jews, Arabs, and Christians. And actually, there are a lot of architectural features in the building which have been taken from Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. For example, there are 12 windows in the auditorium and 12 cypress trees, which of course is meant to signify the 12 tribes. Or if you're a Christian, it signifies the 12 disciples of Jesus. And if you're a Muslim, it signifies the 12 followers of Muhammad. It's got a very large bell tower with a great view of Jerusalem, really worth going in there. Interestingly enough, it was the only football field, in Jerusalem until the 1990s, or at least professional football field. And it also has the first heated swimming pool in Jerusalem, which is one of those swimming pools that we knew when we were young. You know, the ones that were about 10 meters deep in the deep end, and your father threw you in, and under the assumption that you wouldn't drown because you'd very quickly learn to swim. The building actually was also designed by Arthur Lewis Harmon, who not only designed the YMCA, he also designed the Empire State Building in New York. But if that's not fancy enough for you, Okay, Nicole, your favourite hotel here, the Waldorf Astoria. Now, the Waldorf Astoria, when it was in 1929, wasn't the Waldorf Astoria. It was the Palace Hotel, which was a hotel commissioned by this extremely nasty gentleman on the right-hand side, Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, who was an extremely nasty piece of work. We mentioned him previously. It was a luxury hotel. It had 140 rooms, and it actually had telephone. It had private telephones, which was something unique. It didn't last very long. It only lasted until the Arab strike started up. This is the guy that did the construction, and this is the hotel actually was commissioned by an Arab, and the head of the construction was Baruch Kantinka, who was a Jew. He was also high up in the Haganah, which was fortunate because in 1936 the Peel Commission came. That's Lord Peel at the bottom. They came to develop up the first plans for partitioning up Palestine. Here you see them meeting. And not only was the building designed, and Katinka obviously had the plans, there was also a Jew called Yehoshua Feinsold, who was, and he was the guy that put in all the telephones. So all the rooms, so legend has it, all the rooms were bugged, and the Haganah knew what was going on. By the way, Katinka, when he was digging the foundations, he found a large number of Muslim graves. If you look opposite the Waldorf Astoria, you see that there's a Muslim cemetery there. He went to Haj Amin al-Husseini and said, perhaps you shouldn't build this hotel because you're desecrating Arab graves. And the Mufti said, build. Anyway, as I said, it didn't last very long. When the State of Israel was established, it became government buildings. I think it was the Trade and Industry Ministry or part of it. And then the current Waldorf Astoria was built, funded by the Reichman family of Canada. But of course, the Waldorf Astoria is a poor version of this hotel, which is the King David Hotel, which was built 200 rooms and 60 bathrooms in those days. It was also built in the 1930s on Julian Way, which became King David Street. Obviously, not every room in those days had a bathroom. And when it was opened, until they had a proper kitchen organized, they actually brought the food from Cairo, which was served with pomp and circumstance by waiters decked out in long white robes with broad red sashes, fezzes, and white gloves. And in the 1930s, the hotel housed the Dowager Empress of Persia, the Queen Mother of the King of Egypt. King Abdullah I was a guest there. It also provided asylum to deposed kings, such as King Alfonso of Spain, who abdicated in 31, Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, and King George II of Greece, who was turfed out by the Nazis. Now, when the Arab riots kicked off in 36, the British Army leased the top floor of the hotel, and later they leased the entire southern wing that became the administrative and military centre of the British in Palestine. And infamously, in July 1946, a bomb was placed in the restaurant kitchen, which killed 91 people. British, Arab, and Jews died. And in 1967, when Jerusalem was united, the hotel added 2 floors on. And of course, it housed many leaders, most American presidents, lots of British prime ministers, but more importantly, the hotel has housed Prince Charles, Madonna, Richard Dreyfuss, Elizabeth Taylor, and my old favorite, Danny Kaye. Oh, I love Danny Kaye. But anyway, if you really want to stay somewhere decent, as I mentioned, when I pay for a review, I expect something more interesting than that. So